Hello and welcome to the Career Success Podcast. I'm Jason Connolly. If you're a regular listener, it's great to have you back. But if you're new, welcome to the show. In this series every week, we speak to the biggest names in business all across the globe. We talk about career stories, the lessons learned, how they overcome challenges, and what success habits they practice. Practical advice to help you in your career. If you have a passion for business, then this is the podcast for you. In this episode, I'm joined by Razi Mireskandari from London. Razi took over as the managing partner of West End law firm Simmons, Muirhead Burton in 2010. Since then, the firm has more than doubled in size with a pre-COVID turnover of about 17 million. The firm currently has about 90 lawyers, and although a full-service law firm, it's well known for its media work, its most high-profile recent case being the successful defence of Johnny Depp's libel claim against the Sun newspaper. Razi, thank you for joining me on this episode.
Absolute pleasure, Jason.
So you run an absolutely successful law firm. I know who you are. I'm sure lots of people in the legal industry do. But for those who don't know you, don't know the law firm, let's talk a bit about the law firm and who you are, what you do, and the work that you do. And I know you're a very entrepreneurial law firm. I'll say that from the start.
The firm generally, or me? Which one?
Let's talk about the firm. Let's give a brief introduction to the firm and who you are and what you do, and then we shall talk about you and your background.
The firm, we're about 140 people all in, as you said, about 90 to 100 lawyers. We're particularly well known for our media work, but I guess our biggest department is the company Commercial, who really well known in media as well, but they do a whole breadth of stuff in tech, startups, media work, etc. They're probably the biggest department, followed by the litigation department, which includes the media division, and then we've got not in any particular size, but employment, family, music, property, and that's the guts of the firm, really.
Fantastic. So tell us about you and your story. How did it all kind of get started for you in the early days, and kind of take us on this journey of how you've got to where you are today?
So, mum and dad Iranian. Father leaves first wife and marries my mum, who and then leaves his previous family and 4 kids and leaves Iran. Comes to England in 1960 when I was 3, and that's my particular story. So I was grown up. Oddly enough, my father was pretty wealthy when he left Iran, but then by the time that I went to university, all the money had gone, and the family was pretty skint. So it was this odd situation where I'd seen money as a young kid, but ended up going to a working class grammar school in Battersea. Then went to school in Sussex, did international relations. The original plan was to go back to Iran and be a diplomat for the Iranian.
That's interesting.
This is pre-revolution stuff. So this is prior to 79 revolution. So that was the plan. So I was at university, and then I decided to do a master's in international relations, law of the sea, again with the plan to going back. And as I was doing the master's, the revolution happened, and then the war happened, which was the longest war in the 20th century with Iran war. If I'd have gone back, I would have had to do national service, which meant I would have been in the war. And although my Iranian my Farsi isn't bad, I don't think it's good enough for battle conditions. Certainly wasn't then. So that was it. I didn't know what to do. Did loads of different jobs. Drove a van for the council under Ken Livingstone. Building, worked on just anything you want to name. Because didn't have any money really, and then thought I'd give a crack at the lawyer. There was a possibility that I passed the internal recruitment exam for blue collar workers because I was driving a van for the council to become a higher executive officer at the London County Council, or the Greater London Council as it was then. But then got an opportunity, the last minute, got this, I think it was a telegram in those days. I'd got a place in the Law Society finals, and I got a telegram saying if you're at Birmingham on Monday, you can start the conversion course. So it was an interesting weekend to decide whether I should take this much higher paid job as a higher executive officer in the council, or whether I should go to the law. And in those days, I think there was a 60%, 70% failure rate for the Law Society exam. So it was a big deal. You didn't know if you'd pass. In those days, it was harder to pass the exams, but easier to get traineeships. It's all turned.
What was the deciding factor for you between the two? Why did you decide to go down the law route?
I don't know. It just sounded interesting, actually. At the time, I just think it had more potential, to be honest. I probably didn't know enough about the council. Even though I was driving around, I didn't know where a higher executive officer would have led you. I didn't have much idea. But the law is obviously, it's like being a fireman or a train driver. You sort of more or less know what the job entails, or think you do. And I guess it sounded more interesting. That was it, really. Bigger risk. So yeah.
You went for it.
Yeah.
So how did you go from kind of there? What was kind of your experience of your early days in law? Kind
Listen.
of talk to us.
Yeah, my original plan was to be a criminal barrister, and
Sure.
when I asked around, people said to me, your dad's not a judge, and you haven't got a double first from Oxbridge, so it's never going to happen. So my plan was to qualify then as a solicitor, do crime as a solicitor, impress everybody with how brilliant I was, and then transfer to the bar, and then they'd instruct me. And I soon found out that other people were more committed to defending criminals who were facing criminal charges than I was. I think probably 70% of the time I was totally committed, but 30% of the time for some clients, I took a different view.
Why was that?
Well, I think, you know what? I'll never forget a single mother coming in to see us in flip-flops in freezing cold winter, being done for nicking something like 15 quid's worth of meat to feed her kid. And I would have fought to the end of the world to get her off, even though she didn't steal the meat. But then you get other guys who know what they're doing. Like, a great example would be growing dope or whatever. It's a business, right? They know the risks, they know what will happen, they know, and I don't mind them playing the game, but it's things like when they don't turn up for, this is the old days, but they won't turn up for interviews, and you say you're late and they say you're on Lucas Aid, which used to be the acronym for being on legal aid. And it was just, I just didn't sit comfortably with all that sort of stuff. The other big thing was I remember still also prostitutes being fined. And I remember being in court looking around and going, this is just wrong. The only sort of, in those days, things have changed a lot, but the only woman in the court being the woman in the dock, and then getting fined for that when everybody, I just didn't. It did.
Yeah.
You know what? The great thing about civil, I mean, that's what I wanted to be then. And then I realized, you know what? That's not. I don't feel comfortably. I wouldn't be happy being a judge, for instance. I don't particularly like judging people. That's how it feels to me. Yeah. The law is as good as any other way of resolving conflicts, but it's not perfect. It's not. It hasn't got a. It can't ascertain the true truth. It's just a way of dealing with a problem and moving on. And I'm very much more comfortable in the civil context, where essentially it's about money or rights. It's not about the court state telling you how to act.
Yeah, I can relate to you. I was a police officer for many years, and I left for a multitude of reasons, but one of those was because I wasn't comfortable with a lot of the things I was expected to do. So that was the end of it for me.
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? It's difficult. I mean, I think I am a firm believer that, if you're going to play, you've got to play by the rules.
Yeah.
And if you don't believe in the rules in that sense, it doesn't mean you're going to break them. It just means, maybe it's not the sphere for you. So that's what moved me away from wanting to be a criminal lawyer. Oh, it was very weird. So I actually I never had massive ambitions. I have to say, I'm not. It's odd. I'm not a sort of massively ambitious guy. It's just that when I get a job, I just feel I have to do my very best at it. Not because of my career. It's just feel when you get a job, you got to do your best. It's like playing for a football team or whatever it might be. So I remember coming to that conclusion pretty quickly. I transferred my articles to this firm, Muirhead Burton, who was so well known for human rights and crime, etc. in those days. And I transferred because I wanted to get into the interesting crime, the buzz, the central London, not the high street stuff. Even before the end of my article, actually a strange thing happened. The civil litigation partner in the firm in those days just got divorced and was going to go to Dubai to do construction work. And the firm turned around to me before my articles had finished and said, would I be interested in sort of staying on and sort of taking on the civil? I mean, we were tiny. Let's not get carried away with this, but to take on the civil department. But I mean, on the one hand, it was incredibly flattering because my articles hadn't finished yet. But I was 3 or 4 years older than most people in that time. But nevertheless, it was a baptism of absolute fire because I started doing civil and learnt every single thing from the floor up.
That's really interesting. So I'm guessing you went into this department and it was you was effectively managing people, but who got more experience than you.
I think managing would be look. We were tiny then. If I remember correctly, I thought it's Chris Davey, I think her name was, this wonderful woman who was a year before me as a trainee, but much older than me. Not much, but a few years older than me. And a few years means a lot in those days when you're that age. So she was actually older than me, but less experienced as a trainee. And I remember me and her trying to sort of work together. I mean, yeah, I'm not sure if I was managing anyone. It was just all hands to the deck to learn things as we went along.
Okay.
She actually, I remember once while we were working together, I remember being upset because I thought she'd done something. She should have done something that I thought we were clear on. And she taught me a great lesson in management, because by 11 o'clock of that day, she turned around to me. She said, "What's the matter with you, Raz? What are you doing? You look like you're sulking." And I said, "Well, to be honest, Chris, I was a bit upset by this." And she said, "Raz, you've got to say things immediately." And that's a big management lesson I've learned. If there's something that happens, good management, you just deal with it there and then and get it out in the open.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I'm all about that. If there's a problem, you tackle it head on and you deal with it, and then it gets resolved. You move on. So you say you're not ambitious, but you're the managing partner of a law firm. That it almost sounds like kind of polar opposites in a way. How have you became the managing partner? Why do you think that is? Why do you think that people want to be led by you?
Look, individually to do with this firm, there's lots of
Mm,
things that happen that would very this firm specific, which are probably not appropriate in the wider term. I think, listen, I've been around the law long enough, and I've seen different firms managed in different ways,
yeah,
and I'm not one to knock how another firm does it, because I am a firm believer in the people who in that firm are really dedicated to the firm and
yeah.
care most for the firm would probably come to the right conclusions as to how to run the firm the best way. I
Mm,
mean, listen, if you're running a conveyancing firm that does essentially competes for bucket shop conveyances, you're going to have to run it a very different way to the way we run this firm. This firm is what our work is essentially complicated issues where what we want is really bright, good people to apply their minds. There's no sort of repeat precedent. It's not as if we're churning out stuff where every single thing's going to be the same. We do no low value, high turnover work. Hardly any two cases are the same. So we actually need really bright people to apply their intelligence to every individual circumstance. And it seems to me, in order to get the best out of bright people, you need them to feel the best they can.
How do you empower people?
Well, look, so what do you do? You need to make people feel good at work. And my
Yeah.
mantra is, what is it? It's about, I think, probably 10 to 15% of your overheads are taken up with the actual building, right? So fine,
Mhm.
spend money. I mean, but in my experience, you could be in Mayfair in the plushest offices in the world and hate it, or you could be, in offices that are not great but really like it. So what's the difference? I mean, obviously, nice offices make a difference, but the real difference is the people you work with. So
Yeah,
what
I've been in a nice office, Raz, and I've absolutely hated
it's
it. And I've
hateful.
been,
Yeah, yeah,
when I started my business, we was in 40 Towers, and we
yeah,
absolutely loved it. So
exactly.
I
So,
agree.
what you need to do, it not need, but and then for us, things like, I mean, we believe in diversity, not because it's sort of trendy. I mean, I genuinely believe that diverse bodies, and maybe I would say this because of my background, but I think diverse bodies make better decisions. And certainly if we, as a diverse firm, we reflect our clients, which I think is really important as well.
Yeah,
Um,
I think diversity brings out the best in an organisation, being fully inclusive.
yeah. So, but I think people underestimate, what diverse means.
What do you think diversity
Well,
means?
diverse to me, and I see it in my firm, and I absolutely adore it. I have to say, diverse
Mhm.
means seeing a practicing Muslim sitting next to a gay guy, sitting next to somebody who, is not religious at all, right? And occasionally, not, nobody tries to sort of convert anybody else, but being able to have the conversations that don't wind each other up and they
Yeah.
make each other smile, and they
Well,
see it,
exactly.
and that to me sums it up. That's just what it's all
Mm.
about. And I think, and I'm so proud. I love London. I just think it's a fantastic place. I think it's the most diverse place on the planet, truly
Yeah.
diverse. And
Hmm.
I think that's what gives London its strength. And when you see that sort of interaction, a bit of me thinks that's what it's all about. Forget the law, forget this, forget that. It's what it's all about. At the end of the day, we're part of society and a business like anything else. In our little way, we can create an environment where that sort of thing can happen. And it's so difficult to do that in so many places in the world.
Yeah, I agree, and I've always said that I think everything can be copied in a business apart from the culture. You can't copy a culture. You can't copy the well a culture is a culture. But I'm a gay guy. I agree. I think if you've got a diverse workforce, it brings out the best, and it's going to appeal to every client if you're fully represented in every single way. So yeah, I agree. So you run this law firm every day, and I imagine that with any business it comes with a lot of challenges. How do you kind of what's your leadership style? How do you deal with challenges? How do you kind of go about dealing with things head on? You mentioned that you get the problem tackled straight away, but do you have a certain way that you tackle challenges?
I'm just trying to be honest. I mean,
Me too.
I don't know how else you do this.
Mm,
People
mm,
nowadays. I mean, our people anyway. They're so bright.
sure.
I mean, everybody's. They're bright, right? I mean, there've been people that have done brilliantly at school, done brilliantly at university, done. They're bright people. They see what's going on. I genuinely think that people that buy into a false narrative or try and promote a false narrative get caught out, get seen, right? So you've got to live it and
Mm,
walk it and believe it genuinely. And if you don't, it's like if you're trying to sell a false narrative, you're having a drink with colleagues and stuff, they'll find you out in social things, like
sure.
let's say you want to say, oh yeah, we're a real diverse firm, right? Fine.
Yeah.
You do your website, you do this, you do that, and you're having a drink, and then somebody says something, I don't know, because they're in a minority group or whatever it might be, and then it's like you can see it in somebody's eyes, you can see it in the way they react. You can't manufacture that stuff, you can't make it, you can't pretend you're
Yeah.
diverse when you're not. It's the very core of you. So I don't know. I mean, I have what's a good example? I don't get somebody from another country to run a law firm, even though English might be perfect. Their attitudes will come through straight away if they're not buying into all the things that we care about.
You come across extremely positive, extremely optimistic. It sounds like you've got a really transparent culture in the firm, and transparency, I guess, is great. People know where they stand, but I'm feeling this real sense of optimism. You don't necessarily strike me as your everyday managing partner, which is not a bad thing at all. But I think maybe your background and stuff like that, you seem very real, and I think that's a great quality for clients. Is that kind of inherent throughout the firm? Is that kind of a real part of your culture? It sounds like, you come across to me. Yeah, it's not. I hope you don't take it as an
No,
insult,
no,
but
no, no,
you
no,
come across as a real
no,
person.
Jason. No, Jason. Look, I'm one of many. First of all, so
Yeah.
and people see that, and there's other. I've got great equity partners. There's 7 of us now. People can see we're all different. I know I'm the magic partner, but I'm genuinely one amongst many. And we discuss everything, in as democratic a way as we can. And it's not as if we can do everything by unanimous vote, but that's how it is. But listen, Jason. There's a battle of, if you like, competing cultures, and maybe I would be the worst managing partner if I was running a firm where I had, I don't know, 30 paralegals having to churn stuff out. I think I'd be the worst managing partner for that, because I
Mm.
think that what you need for that is you need somebody who keeps on top of the metrics, calls people in, says you haven't done the time recording today. I mean, it's that sort of stuff. It's like working in a factory and you haven't done your hours. You haven't produced enough widgets or enough quality widgets, I guess. I mean, but I think my world, and I guess that's why I've ended up here, because I guess you end up where you're going to be most productive or efficient and stuff. That's why I've ended up here, and I get we'll find out in the long run. I genuinely believe the world's problems today are not going to be solved by an individual. I know Einstein did the theory of relativity, and he was a one-off genius. But you get these for quantum physics. You needed everybody, loads of different people. And I guess that's the joy of life. Once the two things get combined, we'll have the theory of everything, maybe. But there's different ways, right? So I don't regard myself as a genius. I think every single real important issue that we have to deal with nowadays will only be solved by people cooperating with each other, and the issues that we now have to face going forward. I don't know if did you ever read Homo Sapiens and Homo Deus by Harari? You know those two books.
I know them. I haven't read them.
They're incredible but the one incredible thing about it is, and I believe this. They say, for someone who's a sort of fervent agnostic like me, you have my theory before, or my thoughts before, was very much that religion is a opiate of the masses. That's my own personal view. But what Harari said was what we can't help ourselves doing as humans, because we're so successful at it, is cooperate in bigger and bigger groups. And in order to do that, we need to create artificial languages or environments. And the two classic ones of that is the law and religion. And money is another one, actually. But if you think about it, like a company doesn't exist in nature, but now it's second nature to us all. We just know it exists it's as real to us as anything else, especially for lawyers. So it's cooperation in bigger and bigger groups. How do you effectively cooperate in bigger and bigger groups? By being able to gel and find things in common. And I think we're going to have to do that as a race more and more if we're going to deal with some of the massive problems like global warming and stuff. It's not going to be solved by an individual nation or an individual person. We all need to get together on a massive scale.
I think you make some really valid points there, and I agree with you. And I think this conversation has got to another level of depth.
Edit those bits.
We're tackling the world's problems one at a time.
Edit those bits big time.
No, I think it's real, raw, and it definitely, I think you make some really valid points there. But we do need to come together, and I think we are more connected than ever. But I do think in a lot of ways we're also more disconnected. I think it's a funny old world that we live in. So you're part of an LLP. I've spoken to lots of different lawyers and managing partners and people who head up big teams on this podcast. And there's a lot of people that think the LLP model is broken. It doesn't work anymore. It's, what's your kind of thoughts about that being an LLP?
My own personal view, given the amount of indemnity insurance we had as a partnership and all the rest of it, is that we didn't need to come in an LLP. But you know what? It was one of those things where the younger guys coming up, I mean, they'd fully bought into this whole modern LLP reflects a modern firm and all the rest of it. And if you look around, so many people are now LLPs. No problem. I mean, that in itself, to my mind, is fine. Being an LLP partnership company, it doesn't really matter to me. What really matters is how you run your firm.
Yeah.
If you run your firm like an old style partnership, right? Yeah. Like some of those horror stories one heard from days gone past where the old guys just hang in on, to grim death to the money and all the rest of it, then that's a different thing. One of the first things I did as managing partner, and I say this, you circumspect. I'm now 63. I took over as managing partner in 2010. And one of the first things I did was put a retirement age from the equity, not from the firm, but from the equity.
Why?
Because I feel that by the time you're, let's say, our age is 66. By the time you get to 66, you ought to be given up for the other guys.
What happens if someone wants to stay on and they're very successful?
No, all of our guys stay on. So far, everybody stayed on. That's not the issue. It's just you have to give up. I think what happens with people when they get to the end of their career, they're effectively largely cashing in on stuff they've done in the past. Or not everybody, but some. And I think our attitude should be as a firm, when you reach 66, what we should be doing is planning for succession well before somebody reaches 66. So by the time that happens, obviously we want that person to be as comfortable as they can be in their aspirations. I mean, obviously we want all our equities, etc., to have lovely lives. But we also think it's important for that person to be focused and concentrated on essentially handing over their contacts and business to younger guys before they actually get to that age.
Okay, that's interesting. What would you say? There's a lot of people out there that want to get to partnership. It's not easy to get to partnership. Me personally, I'm a big fan of West End firms. I love the entrepreneurial spirit. I've always recruited into the West End. I've never been a city recruiter. I just love the buzz of the West End and people who build up client bases and get in their hands dirty. I love all of that. But what advice would you give to someone who wants to become a partner? Because it's not easy. Let's aim this at people in the West End and people who work for smaller regional firms. Let's steer clear of the city. But what advice would you maybe give to people? Or maybe you want to address the city. I don't know. What advice would you give to people on how to get to partnership? What would be your top tip or top tips?
I actually think that the legal market is very, very different. So when you talk about the city
Mm.
firms, it's about the firm, right?
Yep.
Then, and I'm not knocking this. I'm not saying this pejoratively, but in a city firm, they sweat you. Because of the firm's name and the quality of the work they've got, they pay top dollar. They get the absolute best people. But their definition of I mean, they can. There's a lot of really brilliant people, and we're fortunate enough to get most of them who don't want to go for top dollar. But anyway,
Yeah.
they go there. You sweat. I mean, you know this. You sweat. I don't know, from the age of let's say 28 to 48. You make so much money for the firm, and if you fit in, if your face fit in, if you fit in with what the firm does, you get to stay. You make a lot of money, and frankly, you leave after a certain event having made a lot of money and a nice life. But it's the firm's name. I think when you come to the West End firm, it's a lot to do with individual following. Obviously, the firm's name adds to that, but there's a lot more about the individual and what the individual does and the connections the individual makes, both within and outside. In the context of all that, there's lots of granular stuff we can talk about, but I would say one thing: love what you do. If you like doing what you're doing, if you wake up in the morning and you're happy to go into work and you're a bright guy, you will take the opportunities that come. You will be able to identify the opportunities and you will take them. You will learn how to get work in. You will learn how to market, whether it's online, LinkedIn, whatever it is, in all the different phases of life, whether it was a different environment 20 years ago, it would be a different one 5 years, 10 years from now. We all talk about the new normal. But bright people who are committed to what they're doing will do well. I say that because if you have two people, one of whom actually likes what they're doing and the other one doesn't, I would always put my money on the guy who likes what he's doing, because you're going to apply yourself. It doesn't feel like work. It feels like your life and you like doing it. And I think once you get that into place, everything else happens.
How do you think you find that though? Because it's not easy to find
create.
something that you love. How do you
Okay.
even
So,
identify that?
listen. Let's not be naive about this. We're lawyers, right? We're not lawyers. We're not rock stars and footballers or whatever it might be, whatever your passion might be. And if all this passion stuff, as I said to you, I don't think I've ever gone to an interview where I said I've had a passion for the law. The way my life has worked out, the way you do it is by creating an environment where you come in as close as you can. And I don't want to be too naive about this, but where you genuinely like your colleague. I mean, if you had to write down on a piece of paper what would be your ideal firm to work, I would put the ideal. If you could create this, the most successful firm, if you could create a firm where everybody wants to work for other people rather than themselves, so genuinely wishes to do, to help other people in the firm, I think you have a fantastically successful formula. It's really difficult to achieve.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's interesting to hear you talk. All the work I've done in the last decade has been recruiting partners. So I'm asking you these questions. I think I know some of the answers myself, but it's interesting to hear you articulate and say them. But no, I think loving what you do is really important. I think the challenge for people sometimes is actually trying to work out through an interview process. Do you love the people that you work with? Because it's quite an alien and a rabbit in headlights scenario when you're interviewing with someone. But again, I guess if it feels unnatural and it doesn't feel right, and and you're not maybe gelling with the people, then you need to be asking questions. And I always encourage people, try and go out for a lunch with people, try to get to actually know the people rather than just sitting there listing off the roles and responsibilities of what you do.
You're absolutely right. I mean, fortunately, generally speaking, by the time I get to see anyone, they've been seen by other people. So basically, they're at a stage where other people have made the decision about competency and how good they are at their work and all of that. And basically, when I walk in, my primary thing is, do I want to spend time with this guy? Is this man or woman somebody who, if I was meeting clients, if I was going out, I'd like to spend an evening with, just to chat to.
I get the sense of your firm. I think I would like working there. I think I'd probably get on very well. I don't know why I think that. I just do. But if
No,
you'd have me, I don't know.
no, of course. But listen, all this sounds great, but I mean, at the end of the day, all the boring stuff,
Mm,
one still has to hit the targets, you know.
yeah.
I, but
Well,
I
that's that's just standard, isn't it?
yeah,
You're going to have a target in any job. That's
exactly. But I think it's so.
mm,
And the other thing for us, I mean, I guess we have 1,300 hours, as chargeable time. I mean I mean, I've heard some city firms have 1,800 hours.
well,
I
I've heard
mean,
some have 2,400
it's
hours.
insane. It's insane. I've got to stop me if this takes up too much time, Jason. But this reminds me of a conversation I had.
Let's hear. Go ahead.
Okay,
We
so
want to
many
hear.
years. This is many years ago. Actually, I remember how this conversation started because it really did wind me up. We were at a barrister's drinks do, and there was a couple of American lawyers, and me and another English lawyer, and a sort of barrister there. The five of us were all chatting, and we got into this thing about hourly rates, and the Americans were going, "You English lawyers, you're just ridiculous. Your hourly rates are so high." And I started guffawing because I said,
Mm,
in our business, and I remember this so well because I remember the barrister got really upset by me saying in our business, "Oh, we're a profession," and that was. I mean, the SRA's 10 guidelines now uses the word business 3 times. That's how much the world has changed. Anyway,
mm,
setting that one aside, so we got into this ding dong match with these American lawyers, and they're going. At that time, they were saying our hourly rates are high, and we're going, but we've yet to see an American firm that does anything that we do on an equivalent basis and not charge twice as much. So it doesn't matter what the hourly rate is because you put so much time down for doing anything. And I said to this guy, I can't for the life of me understand how you could possibly live a normal life and do the hours, meet the targets that you've got to meet. Do you know what he said? He said, our units of 15 minutes. I get into work at 8:30 and I put in 4 calls to 4 clients who I know are not going to be in. So
mm.
within about 10 minutes, I've got an hour down.
There's something morally that doesn't sit
I
quite
mean,
right
I mean,
there,
I'm,
isn't
I'm
there?
just sitting there flabbergasted from two perspectives, setting aside the moral shit that goes down with it. I mean, I'm actually looking at it and I'm thinking, frankly, no client of this firm would wear that.
I don't imagine your clients would, and I can't imagine. I don't see a Simmons Muirhead and Burton client swallowing that somehow.
And the counterpoint to that is
Mm,
when I left university, one of my best mates got into the mobile phone business in those very early years, and I'm old
sure.
enough to tell you that's when phones were bricks. But anyway, the world was expanding. That world was just so lucrative, and he got to a quite senior position. And I kept saying to him, Frank, mate, hey, don't forget, mate, work this way. And to be fair, he did refer good work, but never the heights that I would have aspired to. And we sat there with a drink one day. He's a lovely guy, and I said, and he said, Raz, you've got to understand this. Look, listen, I'm in a board meeting. We've got a problem, and we're told we have to settle it for 3, 4, 5 million, whatever, in those days, with big figures. And as night follows day, the discussion will go something like this: we've been advised we've got to settle at this figure. And the guy whose department it is, or whose the finger is being pointed at him, will turn around and go, well, who the hell is advising us of that? And if I were to
Mm.
say Simon's, Muirhead and Burton, the next question would be, who? And then I'd have to say, oh, yes, a mate of mine, they're a great firm, blah, blah. No, won't wash. If you went back and said Clifford Chance, that's the end of it. What's the guy going to say? And that's a fact. You just got to, it's a
Yeah,
fact. So
yeah.
our people come to us because they take a view
Mm,
about quality and value for money and contact with partner and all the rest of it. And
mm,
I'm not saying there's some of our clients that are very, very corporate, really well known, make a lot of money, but for one reason or another, the people who've got the hands on the legal purse string are very experienced. I mean, a great example of that would be, the teams at News Group or the Mirror or all the major broadcasters. They're very sophisticated legal, purchasers of legal services, and they look out for who they think is the best firm. They don't need the biggest firms to do it. Mind you, having said that, I think the amounts of money that available in those areas probably wouldn't attract the city firms anyway.
well, indeed. On a closing note, briefly, what advice would you give to law graduates, people who've got a real interest in law? Maybe they're going through the LPC, maybe they are in university at the moment. It's extremely difficult, as we all know, to get a training contract. It's extremely difficult to get your foot on the ladder. What advice would you give to people briefly?
One, either if you're good enough, just get the best, go to the best possible university you can and get the best possible degree. Don't do a law degree if you're not actually interested in the law degree, not the law, but the law degree. So do a degree that you really like doing and go to the best possible university and get the best possible grade. If that is not open to you, do something that makes your CV stand out. And that's
Great
just
advice.
vital. That can come in so many different ways. I think any sophisticated firm nowadays really has to look at, I think it's incumbent on us to actually try and look at the individual stories. And, in the time of COVID, when you hear on the news how little access, for instance, people have to online learning and all the rest of it, you just see the difference. So, you can see that somebody who doesn't go to sort of a great university and doesn't get a fantastic degree, but if you look at their background, they've probably achieved the same as somebody else would have done who got a first at Oxford. I mean, it just depends on your background. So you have to be, the real difficulty, Jason, is there just isn't enough time in the day to look at all I think we get something like 200 applications for each trainee.
Doesn't
I mean,
surprise me.
I don't have to do that anymore. But, one of my partners who has to sift through that, he has to take a view. And I know he's really conscientious, he's a lovely guy, but,
But he's not going to read 200 CVs from cover to cover, is he?
Yeah, exactly. You're not going to go, right, I'm going to spend a week on this to do justice to everyone.
So let's take the learning point as make sure that you stand out, market yourself properly, and have a killer CV, go to a good university if you can, and make sure that you sell yourself well and stand out. I've done an absolute multitude of videos on this, so if anyone wants to look,
Exactly.
go onto YouTube. Listen, our time, Raz, has come to an end, but it's been so nice talking to you. Your stories and your anecdotes are absolutely beautiful to hear. People want to find out more about you. I'm assuming they can go to your website, smab.co.uk. And if they want to connect with you, are you on LinkedIn?
I am. And we've got a new website launching tomorrow. How exciting is that? So,
By the time people listen to this, it will already be live. There we go.
Yes.
Listen, thank you so much for your time. I'm Jason Connolly. Until next